Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to part three of our mini series interviewing con Intención. Very happy that you all have made it to the third part of our series. Right now, I'm going to introduce Loreen Dinkelacker. She is the recruiting director of the Atlas Group. She is a home cook, a wannabe nail tech, and a lover of reality TV. She is the co-founder of the Atlas Group, which is a tech recruitment agency that focuses on helping candidates navigate the interview process and placing software developers and technical product folks across North America. She's recruited for the likes of Fitbit, PayPal, Google, and as well as small to mid-sized startups. I'm really excited to have her here. We previously went through this whole presentation, and I think everyone here is going to learn a lot of great tips, to boost confidence, to know the system, to know the game at the end of the day, and really push through with their interviewing process. So without further ado, I'm going to just hand this over to Loreen, and I hope everyone enjoys. Thanks so much for partaking in today's event.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for the intro, Alexis. I'm so excited to be here and connect with all of you. So I just want to let you know that I have a 6-month-old puppy, and he gets really excited when the neighbors get a package. So you might hear him, just a heads up. So Alexis, again, thanks for giving that introduction. I can go into a little more detail about myself and my background. So I was born and raised in Philadelphia, so shout out to all of my Philly people out there. I've been tech recruiting for a total of 8 years. It's literally the only thing that I've ever specialized in. I've never dabbled in HR. All of my experience has been pure tech recruitment. I've recruited for countless clients at this point and have interviewed thousands of people. I don't really quite know the number, but it's definitely in the thousands. I've had an opportunity to work for a number of amazing clients, both big and small, ranging from small global, larger global tech companies to small and mid-sized startups across North America. And my sister, who has about 15 years of recruitment and talent acquisition experience, her and I co-own the Atlas Group. And our goal is to diversify the candidate pool for tech teams and provide community-based support for job seekers, especially those who have been historically underrepresented in tech. And our clients range from large global companies to small startups. So that's enough about me. Let's get into these topics that we're going to cover today. So let's get into it. We're going to cover 4 main topics today: video interviewing best practices, what gets evaluated in each step of the interview process, and hopefully unlock some of those mysteries there, best practices for tech interviews, and finally, how to not only identify behavioral and situational based interview questions, but how to answer them most effectively. So we'll have some time for questions at the end, and just remember, no questions are bad or stupid. So please don't be shy. You showed up today. So make sure you get those questions in and get the most out of your time that you're spending here today. Okay. So we're going to start off on our first topic that we're going to start off on is going through video interviews. They've become so much more popular since 2020, and with the continuation of remote work and companies now hiring remote talent, they are now the norm. It's something that we really rarely had to deal with before, but it's definitely worth to adjust and to learn the best practices so that you can do well. Now, a lot of these on this list sound and look really basic. You might look at these and say, of course, it's common sense to have a strong internet connection. But everything on this list, either I've gotten feedback from a hiring manager on people missing the mark on those, or I've gotten questions from candidates on these. So the first one is having a strong internet connection. The last thing you want to happen is to keep freezing when you should be on fire. If your internet connection isn't working or it's choppy, the interviewer might have to reschedule, which doesn't sound like that big of a deal, but the team might not want to take time away from their schedule again just to have another botched interview with someone who wasn't prepared with a basic internet connection in the first place, especially if they've already spoken to a handful of qualified candidates that they would like to move on to next steps. it could blow your shot. I've seen this happen before. So just make sure you have a strong internet connection. The next one is test your video capability out beforehand. You want to know what application is being used. Is it Skype? Is it Zoom? Is it Blue Jeans? Is it something you've never heard before? Make sure you ask if there's anything you need to download first. Do a test run with a friend the day before to make sure your speaker and video are working properly. And you want to make sure that you give yourself about a day, just so if you do have technical issues, you're giving yourself ample time to figure that out. There's been situations where someone calls me 10 minutes before, 5 minutes before, and they're not able to log in. They need to download some software. Their computer doesn't support it. They need to update. So they've gotten late or totally blown interviews because of this really small detail that you can just help yourself if you take these precautions. And the next thing is to wear something professional. So this is an interview. Remember that just because you're not in person, it doesn't mean that it's less formal or that it's more relaxed. So wear what you would wear to an in-person interview. A lot of the times these video interviews are taking place of the in-person meeting. So just keep that in mind. If you're unsure about what to wear, business casual is always acceptable. And please wear pants. What if you have to unexpectedly plug in your charger and that comes loose and you need to plug it in? There has been stories that I've heard of people not wearing pants and they stand up and it's game over. So it sounds like something so like common sense, right? But these are things that I've learned we just need to say and talk about. So just make sure you wear pants, okay? You don't want anything crazy happening in an interview to you and to be one of those stories that, you know, recruiters hear. So the next thing is to use a laptop or a desktop. So you don't want to come off as unprepared, which will happen if your picture is coming off funky because you're using a smaller device. So if you don't have a laptop and you need to use your phone, make sure that the person you're scheduling with knows and explain why your laptop is out of commission. Hey, my laptop broke. I'm sorry that my picture might be smaller or coming off a little funky. I have to use my phone for this, or another, like a smaller device, just so that they know. And just something worth mentioning, I felt like these two things were definitely worth mentioning. You'll want to look at the camera when answering a question or speaking. I get this question a lot. Not knowing where to look. So you'll definitely want to look into the camera. And a helpful tip too is to decorate your monitor with sticky notes. And these could be things that you want to remember, right? Maybe you want to ask some important questions that you don't want to forget to ask. Maybe you want to make sure you're not saying the entire time. You know that you tend to do that. You can have a reminder there. Maybe it's a reminder of the stories or examples that you want to make sure you get across to the interviewer. So you have an opportunity when you're doing a video interview over an in-person interview. So you just want to make sure that you're using those things to your advantage. So just something worth mentioning. And you also want to prep on potential distractions, right? You might live near an airport, or maybe you live with a really cute puppy that likes to let you know when your neighbors are getting packages. So you just want to start off the call by saying, hey, I made sure to find a quiet place, but you might hear my puppy, or you know, you might hear some background noise. I live near an airport. So if something does happen during the interview, the interviewer isn't thrown off and neither are you. It sets the stage. You're able to move right through if something does come up or come along. And an important thing to remember is that you shouldn't always take the interviewer's demeanor as direct feedback on how you're doing. I see this a lot. The interviewer could be hungry, they could be tired, they could be going through a personal issue and anything in between. We're humans, right? So if you feel like the interviewer is cold or they're really neutral in their responses, you have to make sure that you're not mirroring that. So still be excited, still be passionate, still be you. Don't let that affect you, right? I think it's very normal and natural for humans to mirror, right? It's a very natural thing. But in an interview setting, it might not be the best thing for you to do if the interviewer's low energy and then you're low energy. It's you want to make sure that you're still being yourself. And the last thing is to practice. You want to make sure you practice. So I'll get into this a little more later, but I think it's a really common theme throughout all of these. And I'm curious, how many people practice their interview questions out loud before their interviews? I'm wondering about that. Because this seems to be a big topic that we talk about today. So I'm just really curious about that. How many people out loud practice their answers to their interview, whether that be in front of a mirror, with a neighbor, with a friend? How many people are actually talking this out? All right, write down what you want to say. Okay, someone writes it down. That's helpful. All right, we'll just go a couple more. Oh, okay. Got you. Okay. Oh, this is the poll for, oh, what's most interesting? Okay, what gets evaluated in the interview step process? That's one of my favorite too. I feel like that uncovers a lot. But yeah, writing it down. Okay, cool. Got you. Okay. So now we're going to go into, oh, I have a little story for you all. Okay. So I had someone who was interviewing, and the interviewer gave me feedback that they weren't going to move forward for a few reasons with this candidate. So we're talking about that, and the hiring manager said he asked the candidate what he knew about the company. And he said the candidate started Googling the company. Now, this was a video interview, and I said, well, like, how do you know that he was doing that he was Googling that? And the hiring manager said he was able to see the reflection on the glasses, on the guy's glasses. Yeah, so keep that in mind. And you might even be able to see my reflection now, that was going on in front of me. But just be mindful of what you pull up, because your glasses really might rat you out. So just something to keep in mind. Yes, contacts. Got to get some contacts. For sure, for sure. Okay. Now, tech interview best practices. This list is short, okay? And it might seem really, really simple, but it's mighty. So after hearing the amount of feedback I've heard from hiring managers and tech teams over the years, this is what I found tech interview best practices to really come down to. Talk it out. So what I mean by this is when you're solving a problem in a tech interview, or you're, answering a question, or, whatever that is in the tech interview, or they want you to work through a problem, you're going to want to talk that out. And what I mean by that is the hiring manager of the team really wants to see how you think. So that's the main point of a technical interview, right? Usually the problems that you're solving during the tech interview have little to do with the answer itself. They're not really looking for the right answer necessarily. They're more so looking your thought process and how you got there and how you think. So if you just tell someone what the answer is, they're unclear about your thought process. They aren't going to understand you as well, or even appreciate your point of view as much, because they don't know what it is. There might be enough time in the interview for them to dig into that with you, if you didn't talk it through and just said, well, I'd go with this. But when you only have so much time in an interview, right? You want to be smart and use your time as most efficiently as you can, basically. Another reason why talking it out is important is because it also shows self-awareness. So you're interviewing, right? You get that the team wants to see how you think. You understand that, and you give that to them. They're able to track with you, which also keeps them engaged in what you're saying. So you're really helping them connect the dots. You're like, okay, I know what you're evaluating here, and I'm going to connect the dots for you. I'm going to give you my thought process. So this sounds like really such a simple thing to do, but it will honestly make such a huge difference in your interviewing skills. And an example of what this could sound like, right? If an interviewer says, you need to get to the answer X, Loreen, okay? And I say, all right, well, I'm talking out loud, right? I'm sharing my thought process. Well, if I want X, I need to do Y or Z, because those are the only two elements that, would work here. If I decided to choose Z, yeah, I'm going to go with Z because Y is usually best for smaller amounts of data and we need more processing power, right? And then you go on. So for as simple as that is, it has proven to be such a differentiator when interviewing. So talk it through. Don't leave the interviewer wondering how you came up with your answer. They don't care about that. The right answer half the time. Again, they want to see your thought process and how you think. So once you know all that, it will really make you a better interviewee. Even if you get the answer wrong, they can still say, well, they knew these concepts, or, well, they were going in the right direction. It helps them level with you in a way that they wouldn't be able to if you didn't talk that through. Another point that I want to bring up here is honesty. So be ready to be honest. And that could be definitely about what you don't know. I've seen this year after year after year. It never fails me. Multiple times a year, I see the biggest mistake, especially in a tech interview, is a level of honesty on where the limit is of that person's skills. So hiring managers are extremely weary of hiring someone who will try and BS their way through something, because that can be dangerous, right? Think technical debt a person could cause if they didn't have the self-awareness to admit that they didn't know something and just spent days or weeks in the wrong direction because they didn't want to admit that they didn't know how to do something or couldn't ask for help. These are all indicators. So how you go, even about, answering a question in an interview, they're saying, okay, well, if they don't know something, that's what they're going to do on my team, right? And that could be unfair. And in an interview, sometimes there's a lot of pressure to want to say the right answer, or you really want to perform well. So I can understand, why that happens in interviews and why that keeps coming up. But the interviewer on the other side is taking all the information that they can. And one of the pieces of information is how you're acting in that situation, the answers that you're giving, and then they're going to translate that to how you're going to be on the team. So instead, they're more likely to hire someone who's honest, that has the passion to learn, the aptitude to do it. So those three things, honesty, passion to learn, and the aptitude to do it, will get you the job over someone who tries to BS their way through every single time. Very, very important. And the third thing is admitting that you're nervous. So tech interviews can be nerve-wracking, right? Especially if you have to code in front of people in a different type of environment that you've never coded in front of, or something that you've never done before. I mean, I can't even type if someone is watching me or on Zoom or something and I'm typing and sharing my screen. I can't even type. So I know that tech interviews can be nerve-wracking, but what you can do is you can say, hey, I'm really nervous. It could really just help you break the ice if you're nervous and help the interviewer connect with you on a human level, right? All humans have felt nervousness up to this point, right? If you're on, to a point where you're doing an interview with another adult, right? So calling that out can really help relieve that tension. And you might even get some reassurance in the moment, but you're making a human connection and you can never really lose by doing that. All right. What gets evaluated in each step of the interview process? This one seemed to be the most popular, so I'm really excited to go through this with you all. And this will hopefully help some unlock some mysteries in the interview process. And if you know what's being evaluated, it can help you prepare more efficiently. So all of these are general evaluation points. This, of course, can change, but this is usually what's happening throughout each section here. Okay, general evaluation. So we have a recruiter. I put that red because a lot of the times we're that initial red flag identifier. But basically, your first interview is, say, with a recruiter. This give me an in-house recruiter. This give me an agency recruiter like myself. This recruiter is going to evaluate if you are a good basic fit and that you could be a culture fit for the company. So basic fit, possible culture fit, right? So they're going to make sure that you meet the basic requirements and make sure logistics work. So are you authorized to work in the country? Are you going to have to relocate? Do you have the basics when it comes to the technologies? What are some non-negotiables in the job description? How does your experience compare? What are the compensation numbers? Do the benefits work for you? What's important? Does it match? Is it a match? So yeah, I think that that's basically what we're doing. We're looking for anything. We're the gatekeepers, right? So we're also red flag identifiers. So how to prepare for this? You have a phone call with a recruiter, right? This is generally how to prepare. So know what you're looking for in a new role. That's something that I ask, and you would be surprised at how many people say, I don't know. Or they're saying, well, I'm open to new opportunities. I'm not really looking, but I would leave for the right role. And I say, all right, well, what does the right role look like? Right. And they're not sure. So just being clear about that, because it would be impossible for me to know if what I have is a good fit for you too. And, we want to make sure we're making good matches. And know why you're a good fit for the position or how your experience translates. So this would be good for an internal recruiter too. Knowing why you're a good fit for the position, and how your experience translates. So this is really just easily looking at the job description, right? And then connecting your experience or your background for that. And be prepared to walk them through your progression of your resume. That's a given. That's what they have. That's the information that they have about you. So they're going to go off of that. And do your research on the role you're interviewing for. Know what the company does. This is especially important for internal recruiters too. I've had countless times when I was internal that I would have a conversation with someone and, they had put a time on my calendar. They wanted to connect on the company. And I'd ask them like, oh, so like, what do you know about the company? I don't want to go over things that you already know. And they're like, oh yeah, I have no idea what you all do. We have access to Google. It just shows like a lack of interest, right? And so that is a red flag. So just make sure that you at least like know what the company does. A lot of situations where you're talking to an agency recruiter, you're not going to know the company, maybe upfront, but because maybe the search is a contingent search, which is normal. So just keep that in mind. And then know your compensation requirements and what you need when it comes to benefits. You don't have to say what you're making, but I think the two numbers that should be discussed in this call is the number that you're looking for, and the company saying what the range is basically. Again, you don't have to say what you're making, but just know like where you need to be at in order for a move to make sense for you. And then this is just like a little tip that I like, but have your availability ready so that if they'd like to schedule next steps, you have that you have that available, you're right there. Because what the next step after this, right? If you think about that would be, setting you up potentially with a hiring manager interview, right? So you just want to make sure like if you have your availability ready, it just shows that you're on point. So we really like that. And of course, come with questions about the role in the company. That's a huge red flag if someone doesn't have any questions about anything. Of course, you can have a really efficient conversation and go back and forth a lot and you can get all your questions answered. So if you don't have any questions by the end, what I would suggest saying is, yeah, I had a bunch of questions written down, but you answered them all throughout our conversation. So just a little tip there. All right, and then we have our hiring manager interview. So generally, the hiring manager is going to assess culture fit, sniff out any potential red flags also. And you may be asked about what your impression of the role is so far, why you're looking, why you're interested in this position in particular, and what you've worked on in the past. Can you do the job? All right. So that's generally what's being assessed here. And then how to prepare for that was, know why you're interested in the role and what excites you about it, right? Very similar to, the first call, especially if it's internal. Know what's important when it comes to team culture. They're making sure that you would be able to fit in with the team, right? So just know what's important to you. Just to add to the culture piece, there's no way for you to really understand the culture of the team since you're not a part of it. So just be yourself. And be prepared to talk about your past projects and what you're working on. So just to go into that a little deeper, you want to make sure that you're bringing real examples of what you're working on and to be able to go into depth with the examples that you bring. That's key, making sure that you're able to go into depth with the examples that you're bringing, if you are bringing examples, so which you should be. So for example, you can say, I worked on an AWS migration. Cool, why were you migrating to that specific cloud platform? right? So knowing the whys and the hows will also help you bring good examples, right? It's a good indicator of what stories or examples to use, right? Think about, all right, well, what would I be able to talk about in depth, right? What do I know the why? What do I know the how about? So I also get feedback that, someone doesn't have enough depth, or, they're kind of just doing and not really understanding the big picture. So that's a great tip. I would 100% make sure that the examples that you bring, you're able to go into depth a little bit, at least on the why and the how. And of course, bring questions, right? Again, if you don't have any questions, that's going to come through like you're not really that interested, a red flag potentially. So bring questions. You can ask about their management style. You can ask about what they see as success in the first 30, 60, and 90 days. You can ask about what the team culture is like, and the projects that the team's working on. So this is a really good idea, a really good way to get an idea of the person that you'd be reporting to, how they work with the team, and what types of projects they're working on. So you're interviewing them too. And then, all right, you pass that. So now you get to the tech interview. So tech skills obviously is what they're going to be evaluating here. They're also going to be evaluating culture fit as well. Like I said, right, is someone going to be self-aware enough to admit that they don't know something and not cause a problem? So tech skills, culture fit. And within tech skills, I would say depth of knowledge and potential aptitude to learn something. Not everyone's going to come into a tech interview knowing everything. So, can you learn? Do you have the aptitude to do that? So how I would prepare for that is to brush up on the tech skills that the company's looking for. Use the job description. You have this huge cheat sheet that you can use, and it's a job description. So look at the job description, see, okay, they're looking, primarily for Java or primarily for React, right? So just make sure that you get the basics. If you aren't able to answer basic questions that are on the job description must-haves, they will not move you to next steps. So just make sure you know the basics. You might have to brush up a little bit, do some Googling. You're not really sure if this team is going to be like by the book. So you just want to make sure you have some basic concepts fresh in your mind. And the next way I would prepare is to keep in mind that they're looking for your thought process, how you're thinking about a problem. So again, I strongly recommend speaking out loud as you're working through the problem in your head, so that they're able to make a connection on why you're choosing a certain answer, and they're ultimately able to understand you better. So just getting mentally prepared for that. And of course, getting prepared to be honest about what you don't know, even if it's uncomfortable for you to admit. I know I said this before, but this is just so important. Again, teams will hire someone that's honest over someone that isn't, and who could, isn't aware maybe even of their knowledge level, and could possibly light the business on fire. So just prepare to say, I don't know, but I can learn. Can you tell me how that tech works? What are you all doing with that? Why did you choose that? So just inquisitive. If you don't know it, it's okay. It doesn't mean you're stupid. It doesn't mean that you don't deserve to be there on that interview. No one knows everything. So it's okay to be honest and just ask about it. And your skills are your skills, right? And then the last thing, of course, is to bring questions. I'm going to say this for every single one on how to prepare, but bring questions. Something on the tech interview specifically, you can ask about the techs that they use, how are new techs integrated into the projects, right? So if someone finds a new tool, right, that could be helpful, is the team open to that? And that could be something that you can ask the hiring manager too, if that's something that's important to you. Any questions that are important for you to understand from a tech environment perspective are important too, right? You can ask how their processes work. So just think about that. The team is who you're going to be working with day to day. So how things work on the team, anything like that is a good question. Of course, anything that's important to you when working with the team, you can also ask about culture too. So the last step would be a C-suite, right? CTO or C-suite. So congrats, you've made it to the final interview. I'm really excited for you. If you're speaking to the CTO, you've almost made it. So don't get too comfortable, okay? Still put your pants on in the interview. You know, you can still be rejected at this point. I've seen it. So the C-suite will generally evaluate culture fit with the team and possibly the current manager. Right? Do you fit with that current manager? How would you two gel together? And then value add and depth of knowledge. So these calls can last anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour. And how to prepare for this is I would come up with questions on big picture, strategy, future of the company. This is a great way to get insight on the direction that the company's going and what the CTO is basically mapping out for the future. So you can really pick their brain about that and get a lot of information about the company that you're, considering joining. And know what you can bring to the table, what you can add to the team, why you're a good fit. And then know what excites you about the role in the company, right? If you get on the phone and they're like, so, why are you interested in the role? What's exciting you about this? And you really don't have anything to say, right? That could be a red flag. They say, well, they might not really be interested, or, they might not stay long-term. They don't really sound that interested in the position. So just keep that in mind. This isn't going to be a technical grilling, but be ready to talk about the tech at a high level and how much depth you have on a subject, but you're not really going to get too much into the weeds. So, you might want to think of, an example that you can connect to the current company, right? If there's something similar that you worked on in the past or similar that you worked on or that you are working on, and say, hey, we had a problem like that at X, my current company, it would be fun to tackle something like that again. So, just connecting the dots there. So that is one of my favorites, I would say, to go over, but basically what's getting evaluated in each step. But my our final topic is also one of my favorites, but let's do a quick poll if we're able to do that. Has anyone ever heard of these types of questions, behavioral and situational based interview questions? I'm curious to see if this is something that is known. Okay. We have a lot that people have heard of these, so that's good. We have people that hasn't heard. Okay, so this is at least going to help a few of you. Okay, great. So behavioral interview questions. We can start there. Behavioral interview questions. Let's start here. And also what they are and how to nail the answers too. So behavioral interview questions, the interviewer is looking to evaluate how you handled work situations in the past. I would say behavioral and situational based interview questions is really to gauge like a culture fit. And with behavioral based interview questions, they're looking to see how you've handled work situations in the past. It basically helps them identify and determine your skills and behaviors and personality based on certain competencies they're evaluating, right? That could be communication, that could be leadership, that could be teamwork, right? So when you're on the phone or you're doing a video interviewing, you're doing a video interview and you hear, tell me about a time, or describe a time, or tell me about a situation, or give me an example when. So that's what you listen for. And how you want to answer this is you want to use genuine examples you have from your past work experience. So you want to think about describing your story in 3 steps. You want to paint a picture of the situation. You want to describe the topic at hand, and then you want to give a clear conclusion. So if you don't have a situation that you can speak to, just be honest about it. If you need more time to think, right? You know that you have an example somewhere, but you're in an interview, you're a little nervous, you can't think about it, you need a little more time. You can say, I know that I have an example for this, but can we come back to the question? I just need a little bit more time to think about it. So you can do it that way too. I also want to mention that it's very important to have a beginning, middle, and an end. I told Alexis this story. It's just going to be a little story time, but I was helping my sister-in-law prep for an interview, and it was for a customer service position. And I asked her a question that would probably get answered in the interview, which is, tell me about a situation where you had an example that, you had an irate customer and they, they left with a smile on their face, or, how did you handle that? In an irate customer. I don't think the question was, and they left with a smile on their face. It's just, how did you handle an irate customer? And she started saying that, a customer came in, it was, for a bank, their check didn't clear or something like that. So they got really upset. And he said, I'm going to meet you outside after work. Right. So I said, okay, well, how did that end? Like, she was really bad at you. She threatened you. How did this end well? And she was like, well, that was it. And I was like, okay, so like, we're not going to use that example because it doesn't have a clear ending and it doesn't show that you diffuse a situation. So every time that I tell these stories about using a beginning, middle, end, I always think about that. But you just want to make sure that you do have a clear conclusion there, and that it's a conclusion that either you learn from or makes you look amazing. Okay, so just think about that. We want a beginning, middle, and an end when we're going through these answers for these situational and behavioral-based interview questions. And situational. So the interviewer is looking to evaluate how you would handle a hypothetical situation. And this helps the interviewer determine how you would react in problematic situations that you may encounter on the job. So these questions may also be tied to certain competencies that they're evaluating, right? Like communication or leadership skills. So what you're going to listen for is, what if you were in a scenario where, or what would you do if, or imagine if. So the way you want to answer this is, if you're able to use a genuine example that you have from your past work experience, very similar to the behavioral-based interview questions, right? These are going to be the same. And again, if you haven't had a situation like that, the one that they're describing, think about how you would actually handle that situation. And think about describing your story in 3 steps. Again, that 3 steps: the paint a picture of this situation, you're going to describe the topic at hand, and then you're going to give a clearer conclusion. So 3 steps. And something to keep in mind is you want to think about what they may be evaluating with their question, right? Whether that be behavioral or situational. If they ask for an example about a time when you were working with someone who you didn't get along with, they might be trying to evaluate teamwork skills, right? And if they ask you to imagine that you made a big mistake and, they want to know how you would handle it, they would be evaluating integrity, right? Just a guess. So it might be helpful to think critically about what might be evaluated with their question, so you can give a very direct response to exactly what they're trying to evaluate. So an amazing tip, I love this, is go on the company's website and see what they say about their company culture, their mission. Like look at their values. So number one, you can know yourself how you align with those aspects of the organization. But many companies will try to assess culture fit with, or their competencies, aka what they're evaluating you on, and they're going to get that from the values. So if you're looking at the company site and you see team communication as a value, right? You can take that as a hint to come up with 1 to 2 examples of when you had to be a good team player or a team communicator, or communicating as a team, and so on. So it's a great cheat sheet to use to prepare your stories for behavioral and situational based interview questions, and which examples to come prepared with. Okay. So that covers all of our topics, but in summary, you have to prepare. I feel like all of these topics are really coming down to preparation, taking the time beforehand to prep for your video interview, right? Brushing up on your tech skills for your technical interview, mentally preparing, understanding what gets evaluated in each step and preparing accordingly to that, getting stories prepared for your behavioral and situational based interview topics, right? Doing some research on the company. And within preparation, I want to talk about practicing. Now, this can be something that we want to run away from because we don't want to do it. We're already nervous about the interview. So I think it's natural to want to avoid and hold it off for as long as possible until it actually has to happen. Or we're just a complete opposite of that, and we're confident and we don't think that we need to practice at all. You know, I've heard, oh man, I should have prepared more so many times from candidates. And practicing is a great way to prepare. Yes, I'm an avoider. I would be like, no, I don't need to do this, because you don't want to, right? You don't want to open up those holes and maybe those spots where you're not as strong, right? It can suck to look at that and be like, oh man, I say a lot, or I don't know how to answer that question well, because you have to criticize yourself essentially, but it's all constructive. But practicing is a great way to prepare. It helps you articulate your words, and you're able to say exactly what you want to say. And you're giving yourself the luxury of time to think, being mindful about the words that you're using. That can make the biggest impact on the message you're trying to get across. And you're also giving yourself the gift of a room for mistakes and sounding bad, right? Giving yourself space to do that so that you don't do that on the actual interview. The first time that you're saying something or answering a question, you know, you want to be where you can mess up, you know, not necessarily on an interview. So it can help you feel more comfortable. So if you think about your first day at a new job, right, or your first time riding a bike, or your first time, you know, traveling to a new place in a new city, right, and then you think about how comfy you got at that job, right, or how you aren't nearly as nervous getting on a bike now, or things starting to look familiar in a new place. So that's what practicing and preparing does for your interview. It gets you comfortable, and it just sharpens your interview skills. Any questions? Oh, informational interviews. Yeah, those are great. You can get a lot of good information from there.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
So for your team interviews, specifically for those who may be pursuing like recruiter positions, how long are those interviews typically?
For a team interview or a recruiter interview?
Well, so for a recruiter interview, I'm like currently, basically I'm interviewing for a position and I have an upcoming team interview.
Okay.
However, I don't really know how to prepare for that.
Okay, so team interview. So do you know if it's going to be technical?
So it's a non-technical.
It's a non-technical. So they're definitely looking at culture fit for sure. So what I've seen in the past, I would ask how long it would be and how many people. Do you know how many people you're meeting with?
I didn't get a lot of details, so
okay.
I don't know.
I would just honestly, to be safe, I would block out 2 hours. That's to be safe. I mean, it might only be an hour, it might be 45 minutes, but I would just block off 2 hours. That might sound a little crazy, but I would just do that to be safe. And what I would do, what I've seen teams do in the past, if it's non-technical, is they're probably going to be evaluating you based off of like a culture fit. So I would look at the company's values, and then each team may be interviewing you based off of culture fit. I've seen a couple companies do it like that before. If I had to guess, that's what I would say. So I would come up with stories based on their values.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? No questions about the puppy?
I have a question.
Yeah.
For those of us trying to transfer into the tech field, do you have any advice for the best way to frame skill transference when maybe our experience isn't technical in nature, but it's like similar skills are required, if that makes any sense?
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I've talked to quite a few people that are transitioning or have transitions into tech. And I would say, you really want to look at the types of roles that you're looking to get into and think about what's transferable. What are some transferable skills? And this might hurt a little bit, but you probably want to take off the jobs that don't necessarily help you, right? Like if you're looking for a software developer position and you've been like a paralegal, right? That might not necessarily help, but say you've been working on projects on the side, that's what you should put on your resume, are those projects, not necessarily your paralegal experience. So if you have any projects that you've been working on, that's really what you might want to focus on. And thinking about those transferable skills. So what I would suggest is to look at a couple different job descriptions, and like for the types of roles that you're looking for, maybe look at like 4 or 5 of them and see if there's any common themes that you can uncover. And, things like communication might be important, or presenting, or leading a team, or a certain technical skill, right? So you might want to think about it in terms of like just really connecting the dots with those sorts of positions. You can do that. And just thinking about how you can transfer your skills and putting that front and center on your resume, and not necessarily saying, well, I have to put all of this experience on my resume, even though it doesn't match, because that's just what I've been doing for the past 5, 7, 10, 15 years. You don't have to do that. The point of your resume is to get an interview, right? So you just want to make sure that you're connecting the dots where you can. So I hope that's helpful. Something else that I want to recommend for people who are transitioning and pivoting, and I mean, even people that are already in tech can do this too. But what I would suggest doing is reaching out to people on LinkedIn that are doing what you want to do, and asking them if you can talk to them, if they'd be willing to talk to you, and if they can give you some time where you can pick their brain and you can talk to them about how they got to where they got to, and hopefully give you some tips and inspiration. I would also want to mention that it's a numbers game. So if you reached out to 20, 30 people saying that, you really might get like 5, 7 responses. So don't take that personally, and don't let that hurt you, but say that you want to be a software developer at Microsoft, right? You want to reach out to as many software developers at Microsoft as you can until you get a hit back. And you might be surprised, a lot of people would be open to talking to you, and helping too, right? If they're already in that position, if they feel like, they can give back a little bit, or, oh, hey, they actually know it, an internal program that they're running for people who want to join the company. So, you can think about networking, right? It doesn't have to be these like weird meetups where you don't really connect with anyone. It's just a really good way to network, especially if you're transitioning. You can tell them a little bit about your story. Hey, I'm transitioning from XYZ. I would love to talk to you, and see what they have to say. And you can also ask them too, right? Being like industry experts or where they are, how they would recommend transferring your skills as well. So, just an idea, but a great networking tip for sure. And just keeping in mind is what I have on my resume. Is this type of information going to help me connect and get this position, right? And I would say it's more about the quality on your resume than the quantity. I'd rather see a half a page resume with relevant information than 2 pages of positions that don't matter or are going to translate well to the job that you're trying to get.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Hi, I have a question.
Hi.
I know we went over it in the slides, but could you elaborate a little bit more on how to respond to a situational question?
Yeah, situational based interview question. So this is a situational question. So basically what I would do is I would try to pull, number one, try to pull from an experience that you've already had, right? If you're able to try to pull from an experience that you've already had. Now, it's hypothetical, right? And they're wanting to see how you would act in a certain situation. So if it's already happened, you can tell them that, but you want to make sure that you're giving a beginning, you're painting a picture, a middle, and then an ending, right? So there's something called the STAR method, which is really helpful. You can Google that too, the STAR method, but that's how I would answer any of those behavioral or situational based interview questions. And then if you haven't come across that situation before, it is hypothetical. So, you do want to think about what they might be evaluating. And then you want to answer the question and try to connect that. So, but again, I mean, going back, I would definitely use a STAR method, have a beginning, middle, and a very clear end on exactly what you would do. So I hope, does that answer your question? Is that helpful?
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay, yeah.
Hi, Loreen. Thank you so much for putting this together. My question is, if we're transitioning, what are the expectations in the portfolio or the examples that we're showing? And how many should we be showing? Because sometimes, again, since we're transitioning in, I'm sort of like starting out. So I don't know, we don't have very much.
Yeah, much work to go off of. Yeah. So I would say it depends. Like you say, portfolio. So are you in design?
Yes.
Okay, so you're in design. You don't have much of a portfolio. Yeah. So I think the expectation, if you are a little more junior or you are just transitioning, right, you might not have that much. And there's nothing you can really do about that unless you get some work. So I would think maybe something that could be helpful is to try to take on smaller projects, right? And try to build up your portfolio. So I'm not sure if there's anything on like Udemy or something like that, right, where you can kind of work through some projects, but it might be helpful to look into that. Especially if you're a designer, you definitely want to make sure you have a portfolio. So I think for now, that would be projects, right? That would be projects that you get through one of those courses potentially. That's all you have to work with now. So I would say starting with that. And one thing that I did want to mention for GitHub is if you are going to put a GitHub or say a link to your portfolio on your resume, make sure the link works and make sure that your GitHub's code looks good, because there's been countless situations where there's a GitHub on a resume and the hiring manager's like, oh, great, there's a GitHub. They click into it and it's the worst quality code. And they are almost confused as to why this person would put something like that on their resume. So when you think about, contributing a lot to that repository, just think about the quality of that. And it's same thing with the resume. It's like quality over quantity. So you might think, I want to get those little green squares, right, to fill that up, but you really want to focus on the quality. And for the portfolio, I honestly would just say projects. Just try to work on some like little projects if you can get them, again, from like Coursera or Udemy, but something's better than nothing. So if you can get that at least, that's what I would say to go for.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. And something else that you can do too, if you're a designer, you can also, now I wouldn't recommend this for anyone else that's not a designer. Please don't do this if you're not a designer, but if you're a designer, you can also design your resume, right? It doesn't have to be that like traditional experience, whatever. You can, if you're a designer, you can actually have a little fun with that. And hiring managers are going to look at your resume too and see how you designed your resume. So that's another thing that you can actually play with too.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
Hey, Loreen, there was a question in the chat. It was
yeah.
from Nicole Rivera, and she said, are there any specific books or articles to read in regards to, I suppose, an Amazon interview?
I'm not sure, to be honest with you, about Amazon interview or what, but if you're looking for resources, we may be running a course, like a job search course. We're not sure if we're going to run it yet, but potentially. We ran it a year or two ago. So we may be running that again. We have some updated stuff. So that could be a potential resource. But as far as any books, I don't know any particular books, to be honest with you, or articles to read interviewing. This is interviewing advice. One piece of advice I would give, you might want to stay away from like career coaches, especially if they don't have any hiring experience, which I've seen. So I'm sorry that I can't give you any specific on maybe what to focus on, but I would try to stay away from like career coaches. Sometimes they make up stories about bots not accepting, ATS is not accepting your resume or automatically rejecting you. And yeah, so I would try to definitely stick with people who've hired before. Any other questions?
Okay. Thank you so much, Loreen. We really appreciate you coming on board and really just diving in and giving us all the details. I definitely learned a lot. Noted to always wear pants during interviews. You know, that's definitely a funny but really interesting takeaway, as well as the glasses. So I'm never wearing glasses on an interview ever again. But yeah, no, thank you so much for hopping on board with this. And I hope everyone got the answers they were seeking for. And please, please, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself. I'm Alexis, by the way. I don't know if I introduced myself in the beginning. I do events for Techqueria. To myself or Loreen. Loreen has been such an amazing person to work with. She is open, responsive. Any questions you have, she will answer to the best of her ability. So yeah, hopefully we'll be able to work again in the future and provide more content in regards to acing and nailing our interviews. I hope everyone has an amazing day. Oh, you guys are so nice in the comments. Thanks so much. And yeah, and I don't know if Loreen has any parting words, but if not, let me know.
Practice. And for everyone that's pivoting, do it.
I agree. I didn't, fun fact, I didn't come from tech. I always had like a entertainment, even law firm experience. So like the transition into tech was kind of interesting, but definitely, yeah, play up on your words, play up on your skills and match what you can.
Yep. That's
yeah. So thanks again. I appreciate it. Also, just wanted to mention our Primavera networking mixers are taking place tomorrow in San Fran, New York City. Not Cali, hello. San Fran, New York City, Miami, and Austin. So we hope to see a few of you there. And thanks so much, everyone. I hope everyone has an amazing week.
Bye.
Bye.